you let go. Let me tell you, friend, believe me when I say I know. It always feels like we're punching in. Well, I'm glad you stopped by. The fun is about to begin. You paid good money at the door and get ready for a real good show. If you wanna have a real good time with me tonight, you gotta move like crazy, dancing in the pale moonlight. We can all get down, spin inside out, I'm telling you. If you really wanna groove, you gotta make a move.
Well, Kirk, we're always making moves. Some days we're making grooves.
Yep.
But today, we're going to weevil.
Now that we haven't done before.
We haven't done
no
that one.
No recollection of us ever weeveling before. So we're really excited today to have our fellow Central Nebraska innovator, founder of Grain Weevil, Chad, with us today to kind of talk about how he's innovating right here in Nebraska, and kind of how his company came to be and his journey for getting here. So go ahead, take it away. Tell us a little bit about Grain Weevil, and then then we'll go step back and talk a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing is that Grain Weevil is a father-son robot company out of Aurora, Nebraska, and we build a grain bin safety and management robot. And I'm sure we'll get into the story, but a local farmer saw a robot that my son had made while he was in high school and first part of college, and challenged us. And all he said was, "If you can build that, build me one to keep me out of a grain bin." And so that's how this whole thing started, and took a little bit of failure.
Yeah,
a lot of bad ideas. Most of those came from me, but then we finally got a robot to drive, and here we are, a full-fledged startup that's just rocking and enjoying.
Yeah,
I get to build robots with my kids, so what could be better?
Yeah, that's a pretty
amazing.
cool thing when you can do a father-son business and build robots.
Yep.
I mean,
It's very cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So can you share a little bit about kind of your personal journey and kind of your career and how leading up to your starting of Grain Weevil?
Sure. So my son just graduated from college with an electrical engineering degree. Mm-hmm. And so I like to argue my double E is way more valuable than his double E.
What's your double E?
Elementary education.
Okay.
So I was a school teacher for about 5 years, and then I got to be a stay-at-home dad.
Okay.
So when Ben was young and my daughter was born, I was a stay-at-home dad, and I was writing software on the side and doing things, but most importantly, just giving my kids opportunities to do creative, innovative things, even when they were little. Mm-hmm. And just happened to be at the Edgerton Center there in Aurora on one day, and just kind of started messing around with a bunch of the other kids that showed up, and then the director came out and said, "Man, you want a job?" And I said, "Only if my kids can come with me every day."
Wow.
So that's how we started. I had gone from elementary school teacher to stay-at-home dad to now I'm running the education programs at the Edgerton Center. Uh-huh. And we did that as the kids were growing up. And so my son, Ben, grew up at the Edgerton Center tinkering.
Wow.
Learning that whole story about Doc Edgerton and all of that innovation. And so it laid a great foundation. And then I found my way to Nebraska Public Power District. Where for the last 13 years or so, I created education programs, delivered those programs all across the state to teach workforce skills, to teach electrical safety. And as a matter of fact, that's kind of how this whole project started. We started doing competitive robotics. NPBD sponsored that in central Nebraska. And so I kind of took the lead and helped a lot of schools. But we started the nonprofit organization in Aurora called Youth Engaged in Technology and Innovation.
Nice.
And so it was the competitive robotics. And then as the kids got older, we started challenging them to do to solve community problems. And so I actually started a traveling makerspace with NPPD that would go around and use makerspaces to teach workforce skills.
Okay.
And then this whole concept of innovation and how to use innovation to motivate kids. And that's the program that we started to develop. Just so happened that I had a son that liked this stuff, and so was a really good guinea pig. And he got to solve a problem for a company in Grand Island. They needed a display for a trade show, and he figured out all the electronics to make this really cool dynamic display. That was our first community problem that he solved. And then for random, we met this guy at a trade show here in Nebraska that ran a startup in Chicago.
Okay.
And he's like, man, I could really use a really cheap robot platform for us to do testing with our video streaming. And so Ben said, sure. So his senior year in high school, he taught himself how to do his own printed circuit boards. He started, just giving them opportunities that are well beyond what you could expect a high school kid to do. And then that's the robot that the farmer saw and said, man, if you can do that. But I think most of my career has been my son and my daughter have been our guinea pigs, but then taking that all across the state and trying to do that same thing for kids all across the state is kind of been my passion.
Yeah.
So yeah, started. We made a robot work for the first time. And
so how long did that take you from the time you had the idea, let's do this, to the time you had a prototype or a working one that you were pretty comfortable with?
So he was in college when we got the challenge.
Okay.
And that was in sometime in 2018.
Okay.
And then tinkered around, did a lot of, like I said, you have to figure out in innovation how to celebrate your failures. And we got a lot of interesting things that didn't work up on our shelf that we celebrate. Our trophy case is full of failures instead of successes, because then there's a lot more stories behind those failures. Right? So it started about 2018, and we'd work on it. We'd come home from college and tinker around a little bit. And March of 2020, just this ugly orange 3D printed, duct taped together, like battery hanging off of it. Took it out to the grain, and it drove up out of the doorway of a grain bin. Lasted about 20 seconds, and our farmer was standing there. Ben and I were standing there, and I'm glad there weren't video cameras, because there's 3 grown men just jumping up and down, just like acting like we're 4. It was just so exciting to actually see it work. And then we're still just thinking this is going to be a fun project to learn. It's an educational thing. But that morning, I don't know if you guys know this, but my neighborhood's pretty cool.
Yeah, you mentioned it before.
Yeah. So I got a neighbor that's a patent attorney. So we called him up and said, hey, let's write a provisional patent this morning. So we drove out in a grain bin, ran back to town, wrote a provisional patent. He submitted it on Monday, got approved on Tuesday, because Tuesday night was a local showing of the Silo film.
Okay.
And that's the full featured film about a death in a grain bin.
Okay.
It's a very, very powerful movie. And we set up this ugly robot and this little display of the video and a whiteboard and a whole bunch of stickers and pens, and said, this is what we can do. What do you think? What questions do you have? And they come out of that film very emotional. They see this robot, and we got hundreds of sticky notes.
Wow.
How long does the battery last? Can it dig? Can it do this? And if you can do this, that would be great. And just all this feedback from there were probably about 150 people there that night. And someone took a video off their phone of our little display with that little ugly video playing, put it on Twitter, and we got 80,000 views. And
wow.
And a lot of direct messages. And we're like, wow.
The power of
this is more than just a little project.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks later, I'm talking to Matt Foley.
Yeah.
You guys might have heard of him.
Yep, the combine.
You got a combine
right
shirt
here.
on there.
Here we are.
I was talking to Matt about the NPBD projects and brought up our little robot. And he's like, man, you ought to think about doing this as a startup and joining the combine. So that's really how this whole thing started rolling in, and
then it accelerated pretty fast from that point.
Really
considering we're only 2 years, from that point. So
yes, a lot of development. It's really cool. Like again, our neighborhood, I got a vacuum molding company whose owner lives a few houses away.
Okay.
I got an OSHA compliance officer and lives a couple of houses away. And,
nice.
We got all these resources right there in Aurora that are just doing everything they can to help us be successful.
That's awesome.
So that's been a neat part of our story. It's a dad and a kid in a garage, but it's it's a whole community, right? It's all these people that are coming together to help us.
Well, I think that's one of the advantages of innovating here in Nebraska or in rural areas is that sense of collaboration and community, and that's a powerful thing, which I think a lot of people don't realize.
Most people miss that, and they want to go to the proud and the pride and. I'm not going to help them.
Yeah.
Why would we do that?
Yeah.
And that's what we're about. And we're trying to break those barriers down to be like, hey, you got to work together.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, it's the grave for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tremendous help for, I think one of the challenges Nebraska has is telling our own story, right? We're humble. We don't want to claim all.
Yeah,
these
we're a little
things.
too Nebraska nice and humble sometimes.
We are, but it's a super important piece of building this innovation culture here in rural Nebraska is the ability to get people's attention and tell our story. Tell the story of how much the community is helping. Tell the story about. I don't need to go anywhere to get a pick and place electronics company. There's one like less than half a mile from my house. There's all these opportunities out here. It's just a matter of telling those stories and getting more and more people excited about about doing
connecting the dots to that.
Yep.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the Combine incubator program and kind of how that came to be and your participation in it.
Sure. So we actually participated virtually, because March of 2020 kind of.
Oh yeah. So you were right at the beginning of COVID.
So the challenges of COVID were actually provided us with a lot of opportunities. A lot more time available for us to lock down and focus and get some progress done on the robot. But we were able to do the Combine remotely. So most of our meetings with Matt were remote, but we got to do a few of them
in person
throughout the time in person. And I think probably the coolest part about the Combine, it's different than all the other incubators and accelerators around because you do it one-on-one when you need it, right? We don't do module number 6.
So you're not in a 5-week program meeting twice a day for,
right. Yeah. With 10 other, now there's a real value to having a cohort and working with other companies. But with the Combine, we do customer discovery when we're ready to do customer discovery. We talk about the finances and raising money when we're ready for that. So it's kind of it's a modular type of a thing, but it's timely, and it's one-on-one. So especially like for us with Matt, he would do the homework with us. Like, okay, we're going to do assumptions, right? We're going to think of all the things that make your company fail. And what if this happens? And we'll go through these assumptions. Well, he does the same thing for our company from his point of view. And so it's just really cool to be able to compare, we may have tunnel vision, right? We know our company. We know everything about it. We know we're too narrow focused. And then you can compare that to what he sees, and it's just great. And he did that every step of the way. And for us, it's also been a lot about timing. So we started the Combine, and then one of the first things that the Combine did was introduce us to the On-Ramp Agriculture Conference.
Okay.
And the On-Ramp Conference is all of this ag tech focus, but startups sign up and say, here's where we're at, and then there's a couple of hundred companies and investment groups and organizations that then sort through all of the startup companies and say, hey, I'd like to do an interview with these guys. And we were way early, and we talked to Matt about it. And he goes, just do it. Fill out the application. You might not get anybody, or we'll try to make sure somebody picks you, whether it's just another, a part of the generator program that co-sponsored it, or, we'll make sure you have an interview. We got 7.
Nice.
And the very first interview we did, we had to do a pitch. And the very first time we ever pitched our company was to Margaret from Ag Launch.
Okay.
And Ag Launch is another accelerator program out of Tennessee.
Okay.
And they're really farmer focused. Their whole board's farmers. Their whole process is all about doing farm trials. And Margaret was our very first pitch. And boy, that launched us into an opportunity to participate in Ag Launch. But each step of the way, and a lot of it has to do with taking advantage of opportunities at the right time. I mean, it's just matched up perfectly for us, and the combine has usually been a little piece of each of those steps in some way. So,
fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about fundraising for all of us who have startups. That's that's a topic we can't ignore. And I think, you and I, we've managed to do our startups in an extremely capital efficient and very lean way, but we still need capital nonetheless.
Right. Yeah. So our path, first 2 years of failures were all on me, right? I paid for my own mistakes.
Yeah.
And so we actually, most of that first full year, we were self-funded. So, our robots aren't terribly robust, but they're still expensive every time you break one. So we, that was a little bit, but we weren't ready to go full time. But we got through the Ag Launch program, we got 2 SAFE agreements. And those 2 SAFE agreements were perfect timing for matching the state prototyping grant.
Oh, okay.
So we were able to use those matching funds to get that prototyping grant. Again, perfect timing, because that basically got us some funding for when Ben graduated from college. We had enough funding for him to go full time, and his roommate, who's our software engineer, full time. So we were able to use those initial SAFE funds and some grant money to get us to where we added enough value to our company that when we got ready to look at what's next, how do we move from here to the next stage? Should we do more safes? Should we look at some other funding mechanisms? And Invest Nebraska was right there saying, hey, why mess around with a little round right now? You got a lot of momentum. You've gotten a lot of awards. You got a lot of attention. Let's put together a seed round and see what we can do. So we were very, very lucky. Both of our SAFE agreement venture capital groups jumped on board. Okay. Invest Nebraska led the round, so we had a real big local push. And part of my whole push was I wanted the majority of the money to come from Nebraska. I wanted it to be, whether it's farmer groups or whether it was somebody who had experienced an accident in a grain bin, be able to invest. And we went through all of this, and if you take out the one big check from the venture capitalists from our Ag Launch connection, almost all of it came from Nebraska.
Wow.
So we had 2 people from outside of Nebraska invest.
Okay.
And the rest of it was from Nebraska Angels. We had a great response there, and Burlington Capital came on board. And so it was just really important for us to say, look, we don't have to go outside of Nebraska to be innovative, but we also are starting to build the right infrastructure here to help fund the startup culture in Nebraska. The money is important, but the more important is that I don't have to fly out to San Francisco and try to convince somebody that donated or invested in my company that we're doing okay. They're right here, right? They can see us. They can come out. They can come to the grain bins and watch us work. And they have. Yeah, and that's important to us.
Yeah, No, I'm trying to do the same thing with Progressive Neuro, raise as much money here in Nebraska as I can. So,
yeah.
yeah.
We have a pretty good advantage in this process with our mission. I mean, the whole focus on safety and ag, and with Nebraska really got a nice push for ag tech growth.
Yep. Without
in
a doubt.
Nebraska is just, like I said, great timing.
Yeah, it is really
all the
good
way
timing
around.
for you guys. Yeah. Excellent. So where are you going from here?
So it's kind of interesting because we just finished our first official board meeting.
Okay.
So we put together all of the reports and all of the, and we're actually doing something unique. We've created a concept called the MVE, the minimally viable exit.
Okay.
And that is a plan to help us build as much value as we can when we get ready to exit this phase that we're in, which is our seed phase. So there's lots of exit options. We're ready to just self-fund this thing and build a company. We're ready to go out and get a Series A, partnership, acquisition. All of these things are on the table. So as we build this this concept of how to add value, it really helps us focus on some of the other things that are above and beyond revenue. So a lot of what we're focused on this year, we've got some regulatory things. The hazardous location challenges for our robot inside of grain bins. But that leads to needing to implement best practices in document management and kind of growing up a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's interesting. But another exciting piece is that we also, I guess this will actually be the first time we've announced it publicly, we received a National Science Foundation SBIR grant.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's kind of cool because rural Nebraska has never had one.
Wow.
Lincoln and Omaha have had the
yeah.
SBIRs, but not in rural Nebraska.
Yeah.
So that's a neat challenge for us to be able to do that deep tech scientific research as we're developing each stage of our company to get to market. Right, we've got certain milestones that we have to meet before we're ready to get to market, and that research is going to help us do that. So yeah, that's kind of what's next is start figuring out how to make sure that the robot is safe and ready for use, and then do all the research that demonstrates the value that the robot can add to the farmer.
So I have a question. So what is like the application of this in the sense, is this something like, will every grain bin have one of these, or you're going to have like a service tech and he comes and he does this? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we're still developing the exact model. At first, we thought one robot, one grain bin, because that's all that the robot can handle. Whether it's just use case logistics, charge times, and how fast the robot could operate. But through a bunch of innovations, we're now able to manage. Right now, each robot can manage about 250,000 bushels. So give or take, if you got 40,000 bushel bins, you can do 5 of them. If you got, you might need 2 robots to manage 6 or 7 bins, just so you always have extra ones. But we're going to definitely start as a service, just because with supply chain issues. I can't build 1,000 robots. I just can't get the stuff.
Right.
We can still kind of get small amounts. So we're going to build 10 and then go start doing services. And then we'll just keep growing that to when our ultimate goal, the farms that are big enough, will enroll. It'll be a service.
Okay.
And they'll get whatever robots it takes to manage the number of grain bins that they have. And then there's opportunities for farms that aren't as big or only need it for specific tasks. We can do basically a robot sharing type of a thing, or someone could buy 10 robots and provide that service to 10 different farms. So that we're really working on a service model.
Okay.
But who manages that service model? We're still trying to work through that. And same thing with the commercial side. We have a lot of use cases in the commercial side, but we haven't dialed in the actual what that looks like as far as the structure for sales yet.
Well, we got it sitting right here in front of us. You want to talk us through a little bit about kind of how it works and how it's designed and, what everything is for on here?
So you remember I told you a lot of not so smart attempts at the beginning?
Yep.
Who wouldn't have thought the very first thing, augers move grain, so why not use augers to move your robot, right? Seems like a pretty obvious choice.
Yeah, I don't think I would have thought of that, but it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way.
It does. And so after trying, snow machines and tanks and paddle wheels and this snaky worm thing, and we're like, augers.
Yeah.
Should have thought of that first. So it's a battery operated, and it's got 2 extremely powerful motors, because that was actually the biggest challenge.
One for each auger, effectively.
One motor per auger.
Okay.
And those augers, so think of it as a skid steer.
Okay.
Each independently forward or backward, and if I push one forward and one backward, it turns. If I, it actually, it's not a terribly complicated machine.
Okay.
What you see is pretty much what there is: a battery inside and a brain.
And I assume it has some kind of sensor, so it knows when it's getting close to the walls and redirects it. And then it sounds like, one side essentially pauses while the other side continues, so it turns. It can kind of like almost like a skid steer, or like the old tractor brakes where you hit the left or the right to to turn. So it's kind of that kind of thing, I assume.
It is. People look at it and say, "Oh, it's a Roomba for your grain bin," which fine. That's
maybe, but it doesn't clean.
Well, it
levels.
But it's also way more intelligent than that.
Yeah.
So even though it kind of looks pretty simple from the outside, the ability for it to do its tasks, right now, we started driving it. Mm-hmm. Then we're able to drive it virtually with goggles on, sitting outside. Mm-hmm. Last week, for the first time, we were able to pull it up on a screen in Kansas City and drive a robot in Giltner, Nebraska.
Wow.
So first time that anyone's ever been able to level a grain bin remotely over the internet.
Wow.
So that went over really well. But the whole intention is that it will be fully autonomous when it goes out to the farm. And so there are certain patterns that are more efficient than others. There's certain actions that you need to take. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Developing the data for that, to understand that, to build kind of the intelligence. Or
right.
How to optimize it.
Yep. And then it has to be able to go back when it needs to charge and go to its docking station and do all of that. So there's some interesting challenges. The physics of inside of a grain bin are, it's a fluid, right? So a semi-solid fluid. But we're trying to move what we're trying to move on, right? Is the whole intention is to get it level or to push it. So that adds some interesting physics. A Roomba just is on a flat surface. It doesn't have to worry about ups and downs and that whole z-axis location, but we do. And then there's just the whole nasty environment. I mean, it's hot, it's cold, it's dirty, it's gross. I mean, it is no place for a human being.
That's true.
And it is no place for a robot. So that's our challenge.
I used to do that manually, of course, and it was definitely no place for a human being.
Yeah, that's what our tagline is doing the work that no farmer should.
Yeah.
And that's really our mission is if we can actually manage your grain bin from empty to full and then back down to empty again. We're talking about protecting you and protecting your profit, right? We're trying to maintain that grain quality, and that's what this whole package is all about.
So I'm sure other people have asked you this, but in the process of designing this and building it and optimizing it, I'm sure people have said, "Hey, what about using it for such and such or such and such or such and such?" Are you getting a lot of that from folks as they see it?
About every week.
I figured.
Let me tell you what you should do.
Well, I mean, I know that's a kind of a important market, but I've got this one use case that you should work on. I mean, so there's all kinds of basically, we can operate on any granular substance. There's some challenges. Like I showed you guys our little video from me playing around yesterday in the sand. If it's really wet and packs in, we operate differently than if it's a nice loose packed sand. I mean, so there's some challenges, but edible beans and nuts and all of those things are starting to pop up. And yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. Yeah, you know, you think you could, after we get done fumigating the grain, you can go and rake it up? Yeah, that's kind of what we do, right? You know, I mean, so yeah, there's just all these ideas that people see it. They've never seen anything like it before because there's never been a robot that can do this.
Right.
So when they see it, they're immediately like thinking, how else could I use this? And that's the best thing for us.
Well, presumably it works with all the major grains, the corn, soybeans, wheat, milo, oats, etc.
Yep.
Yeah.
No problems at all. Yeah. We've been on rice.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. You know, we live here in corn and soybean country, and you look at the numbers of bushels stored in grain bins. Corn, soybeans are way higher than anywhere
than anything else. Yeah.
But we get almost as many inquiries from rice farmers as we do from corn and soybean farmers.
Interesting.
Yeah,
because
nobody around here, but
nobody around here. But the rice just doesn't flow.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of locks itself together, and they got to get in there. Even at the commercial fields, they're getting into the grain bins.
Interesting.
And raking out the rice, and so they have an interesting need. But yeah, so we've tested on. Let's see, I probably won't be able to remember them all. Well, I should, because like we were having our end of the year party, and I tried to convince my wife, let's make something out of every grain we've been on, and see if the rest of the people notice that there's a theme.
Yeah.
So it's corn, soybeans, popcorn, peas and oats. We've done wheat, we've done milo, we've done rice, we've done northern beans, and pinto beans, and so you know, just trying to think through all of these things. But we ended up not doing that. We just made steaks.
That does sound easy.
Yeah. It was
Can't go wrong with steak. I mean,
it was tough. So,
anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
just super excited to be a part of the culture that's building out here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's, you know, there's a lot of cool things going on in Lincoln and Omaha. There's no doubt. But I think if you take a step back and you look at what we've got going on out here in central Nebraska, there's some fascinating things happening. And I think it's just important to tell that story and yeah, you know, to make a move, right? You don't get up and build something and do something. And I think that's been our theme all along with teaching these kids the real skills. Yeah. You know, I love the reverse pitch business plan competitions, but even better, build a prototype. Yeah. You know, actually
build it, show it.
Build something. Those are the skills that we're trying to develop.
Yeah.
And I think it's happening all over here in central Nebraska.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we just had the what is it, short and scrappy thing?
Back,
you know, through Generator in motion, and that was very much along the veins of that. Just get on with building something, and you know, even if it's imperfect. I think we do have a lot of great things going on with, you know, with Co-Found and you know, what they're doing with Nest and what we're trying to do here. And I feel like we have a greater sense of collaboration and awareness of what each other's doing, and kind of a sense of responsibility to help each other. I think that's going to be an asset for us a long time.
Definitely is. It definitely is.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Riley, any closing words?
Oh, you would put me on the spot. I mean, I really like the whole collaboration, and like I said, I think people can get in that proud moment, and that's actually, it does more harm than help you. Yeah. You know, so you have to, it's the whole, you know, give before you get thing. Yeah. You know, you have to be willing to promote and get out there and be part of the community. Right. And that's very important. And that's, you know, get off of your butt. Go meet people, go hang out and find out what they're doing. And then maybe you have an opportunity to tell them what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And help each other.
Exactly. Hey, Riley here. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Make a Move podcast. For more content, check us out on all major social media platforms and makeamovepodcast.com. Until next time, get off your butt.